Every morning, Mr. Antero shuffled into Bella Massa with slow, careful steps and his head bent low. He always wore the same threadbare tweed coat, trousers faded by time, and a cap that looked as though it had endured decades of sunlight. He settled at his usual corner table and quietly ordered the usual, a black coffee and a buttered roll. Nothing more. To the staff, he was simply the lonely old man. To the other patrons, an unwelcome presence, someone whose humble appearance and silent posture clashed with the sleek, upscale vibe that Miss Ligia worked so hard to maintain. Some guests made a point of avoiding the corner where he sat. Others whispered behind their menus or glanced away, as if he didn't even exist. But no one truly knew who Antero was. No one imagined the weight that name bore, and no one expected the remarkable transformation about to unfold right under their very noses. This may look like an ordinary story, but trust me, it's anything but. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. Chapter 1. Invisible. Mr. Antero arrived at 7 o'clock sharp every morning. He pushed open the glass door of Bella Massa and paused, as if seeking permission to exist. His tweed coat was frayed at the elbows, his trousers faded by countless washes, and the cap on his head looked as though it had endured decades of sun. He braced himself against his wooden cane and offered a polite nod to no one in particular. Inside, the cafe hum of espresso machines blended with soft jazz and the clinking of fine china. Sleek marble countertops displayed artfully arranged croissants and pastries so perfect they seemed sculpted. Customers in designer coats snapped photos of their latte art, laughing over almond croissants dusted with powdered sugar. Amid that modern elegance, Antero's simple cup of black coffee and buttered roll felt like a silent challenge to the glamour around him. The staff barely noticed him. Luana, the new attendant, glanced his way, then turned back to her task without a greeting. She slid his coffee across the counter with such haste that the cup rattled against the saucer. His buttered roll arrived cold and half-heartedly placed on a napkin. Antero said nothing. He laid a few coins on the counter, one by one, as if counting hope itself, then made his way to the corner table. It was his table, the one next to the tall windows overlooking the street. From there, he watched the world bustle by. People hurrying to work, joggers pausing for water, delivery cyclists weaving through traffic. A young man at the next table leaned over to his friend and whispered, "That old guy just takes up space." The friend smirked. Antero heard them. He felt the weight of their words settle in his chest like stones, but he kept his face calm and turned his attention to the steam rising from his coffee. Moments later, a little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Why does that man look like a homeless guy?" she asked, loud enough for Antero to hear. The mother's cheeks went pink. She pressed her child's hand to her lips and hurried them away, leaving behind a harsh silence that felt colder than any morning breeze. Across the room, Miss Ligia, the owner who had once greeted him warmly, giggled with some well-dressed clients at a polished table. She wore a crisp blouse and a practiced smile that never reached her eyes when they passed him by. Antero remembered a time when she called him Professor when they spoke of his Sunday lessons at the church hall. Now he was just the lonely old man nobody bothered to know. He took a slow sip of coffee. The bitterness matched the ache in his heart. Yet he did not complain. He never did. Over the years, he had grown accustomed to invisibility until today. Because today, the photograph on the far wall caught his eye. It was yellowed with age. A black and white snapshot of a younger Antero, chalk in hand, surrounded by smiling children clutching tiny notebooks. He had taught them to read, to write, to dream, free of charge, free of fanfare. No one here recognized him in that faded image, and no one guessed the impact he had on their lives. But the moment his gaze met that photograph, something inside him stirred. He tightened his grip on the cane, straightened his shoulders, and let out a quiet breath. Soon, the truth of who Antero really was would break through the walls of Bellamassa, and nothing would ever be the same. Chapter 2. Memories. Nobody sees, on Monday, the corner table was empty. Antero didn't come. Tuesday, still no Antero. The cafe buzzed, but the silence at his usual spot felt louder than any coffee grinder. No one asked. No one noticed. Until Wednesday morning, when a small voice cut through the chatter. "Excuse me," said a girl of about 10, clutching a spiral notebook to her chest. She looked at Luana, who was wiping down the counter. "Do you know where Mr. Antero is? He used to help me with math here after school." Luana paused, her rag in mid-air. She glanced at the empty chair, then shrugged. "I don't know who." "You mean, sweetie," the girl's bottom lip trembled. "He taught me fractions and decimals. He's a teacher, right?" Luana turned away without answering, leaving the girl staring at the polished floor. Later that day, a group of marketing consultants spilled into Ms. Ligia's office. They were designing the bakery's new anniversary campaign and needed authentic stories, proof of Bellamassa's deep roots. "Do we have any old photographs?" one intern asked, rifling through a dusty drawer. "I want something real and human." Ligia frowned. "Maybe there's something in the main room." She led them back out to the cafe floor. There, above, a rack of fresh baguettes, hung a faded black and white photo. It showed a younger man with bright eyes, chalk in hand, surrounded by grinning children clutching notebooks. Their innocence radiated from the yellowed print. "That one," said the lead consultant, pointing. "Who is he?" Ligia's heart thudded. She stepped closer, reading the scrawled caption. "Friends of Learning Club, 1998. Her breath. He caught. That man was Antero. That night, Ligia couldn't sleep. She pored over old boxes in her attic, finding dusty report cards, faded thank-you notes, and a letter she had written as a child. "Dear Mr. Antero, thank you for teaching me how to read when I thought I never could. Love, Ligia." Her eyes filled with tears. She remembered him patiently tracing letters with her on a battered chalkboard set up in the community hall. She remembered how he refused payment, smiling and saying, "Knowledge is a gift, not a transaction." She was ashamed. How had she forgotten the man who gave her confidence, who opened doors for dozens of neighborhood children? The next morning, she stood behind the counter as the bakery opened. Wordlessly, she lifted the photo from the wall and carried it across to Antero's empty table. She placed it gently in the center, propping it up against his coffee mug. "Customers," murmured. Luana gasped. A hush fell. Ligia raised her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "This man taught me to read, and he taught many of you too. His lessons live on in our hearts. We're going to find him, thank him, and share his story." Whispers spread through Bellamassa. Patrons exchanged surprised looks. Memories long buried began to surface. The man who stopped to help with spelling tests, who sat in the park with neighborhood kids, who once tutored a delivery driver so he could finish school. By afternoon, a friend of Antero's called the bakery with news. He was safe at home, sick with a cold and unaware of the storm he had caused. Ligia smiled through tears. "Tell him we're looking for him," she said. "Tell him he's loved." As the sun set, the bakery lights glowed like lanterns, illuminating the photograph of a younger teacher with a chalk dust smile. Around it, sticky notes from grateful customers fluttered in the evening breeze. "Thank you. You changed my life. We'll never forget you." And somewhere, in a quiet home just blocks away, Antero's phone buzzed with messages of gratitude. The moment of rediscovery had arrived, and with it, the promise of a new beginning. Soon, Bella Massa wouldn't just be a place for pastries. It would be a sanctuary for memories, a classroom without walls, and the heart of a community awakened by one humble teacher. Chapter 3. The Name That Regained Its Voice. 2 mornings later, Antero appeared at Bella Massa again. He stepped through the door with his cane tapping lightly on the tile, his coat swaying around him like a familiar shadow. This time, the bell above the door didn't go unnoticed. Luana looked up from polishing glasses. Her eyes widened. She set the rag aside and approached him with a shy, hopeful smile. "Good morning, sir," she said gently. "Coffee and roll?" Antero offered. A small nod. "Yes, please." His voice was soft, but it carried a quiet strength that made Luana pause. He moved toward his corner table, where a single photograph sat waiting. Donna Ligia had placed it there the night before. In the black and white image, a younger Antero stood before a chalkboard, surrounded by smiling children clutching pencils and notebooks. Beneath it, a handwritten note read, "Our Teacher, 1998. As Antero settled into his chair, Donna Ligia hurried over, her face flushed with emotion. "Professor," she whispered, "I'm so glad you came back." Antero looked up, surprised. "Ligia?" She knelt beside him and gently took his hand. "We found your photograph and your story. We realized how many lives you touched." Tears glistened in her eyes. "We want to share your story with everyone." He swallowed hard. "I never sought attention," he said. "I only wanted to teach." "But teaching is your gift," Ligia replied, "and now it's our turn to give back." That afternoon, the marketing team arrived with final proofs of the new campaign. They'd transformed the bakery's sleek brand into something warm and human. Posters featuring Antero's face, canvassing the neighborhood, each emblazoned with the words, "He gave us words. Now we share his story." A short video followed, a montage of faded photographs, snippets of ex-students' voices, and Antero's own gentle smile. It ended with a shot of the corner table, empty but for his antique cane leaning against the chair. When the video went live on social media, it spread like wildfire. Emails arrived from former pupils across the city. Strangers tagged friends who remembered being taught by Mr. A. Local news crews booked interviews. The bakery's hashtag, "Thank You Antero," trended by sunset. By the next Saturday, Bella Massa was packed. The hum of conversation was different now, less about pastries, more about gratitude. Patrons of all ages filtered in, clutching handmade cards, flowers, and notebooks filled with lessons once learned. Antero, seated at his usual spot, looked overwhelmed. He accepted bouquets and letters with gentle nods, cradling each gift as if it were a fragile book. With every handshake, every whispered "thank you," he seemed to grow taller. A filmmaker from the local TV station leaned in with a DSLR camera. "Professor, would you say a few words?" Antero cleared his throat. For a moment the chatter died. Everyone leaned forward. "I never asked for praise," he began, voice trembling but clear. "I taught because I believed in each of you. You were my reward. Today, thanks to all of you, I feel seen once more." A hush fell over the room, broken only by the soft click of the camera. Then applause broke out. Gentle at first, then growing into a roar of heartfelt appreciation. Evening settled. Donna Ligia raised her cup in a quiet toast. "To Professor Antero," she said. "May his lessons live on." Antero smiled, tears in his eyes. He lifted his cup in return. The clink of porcelain echoed like a church bell. In that moment, his name was no longer a whisper in the corner. It was a chorus, carried through every heart he had ever taught. And as the crowd dispersed, one thing was clear. The man they once overlooked had finally found his voice. Chapter 4. When silence teaches more than words. On that crisp Sunday morning, Bella Massa's doors opened to something far bigger than fresh bread and steaming coffee. A soft golden light spilled through the windows, illuminating a long line. of neighbors, former students, and curious visitors stretching down the block. They held flowers, handwritten letters, and homemade signs. "Thank you, Professor Antero, and our corner never forgotten." For once, the bakery was filled not with the chatter of latte art, but with a reverent hush. Miss Ligia stood behind the counter, her heart pounding. She wore a simple blouse embroidered with the words "Sala do Saber Antero," the new community classroom she had inaugurated in his honor. The name hung proudly above a makeshift stage at the front of the room, where silence speaks volumes. Beneath it, a carefully arranged gallery of photographs traced Antero's decades of teaching. Black and white snapshots of chalkboard lessons in a church hall, candid portraits of him helping a trembling child write her name, and color prints of him smiling among teenagers at a local fair. When the bell chimed and Antero stepped inside, leaning on his cane, eyes wide with quiet astonishment, the room held its breath. He paused at the threshold, taking in the scene. Rows of folding chairs filled with eager faces, the gallery lining the walls like a silent chorus of memories. It was as though the entire community had gathered to say what no one could express in words. A single spotlight found him. He shuffled forward and reached the stage, tracing the edge of a wooden podium with his fingertips. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the applause wash over him. Then, clearing his throat, he spoke in a voice so soft that many in the back rows leaned forward. "I never expected all of this," he began, glancing at the faces he had first met decades ago. "I taught because I believed that every child deserved a chance to learn. I wanted to light a spark, not seek a spotlight." A ripple of emotion passed through the crowd. Miss Ligia signaled to Luana, who cued the first slide of a silent film playing behind Antero. Grainy footage showed a younger version of himself, sketching letters on a chalkboard propped against a church wall. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, their eyes shining with fascination. The film ended with a freeze frame of Antero and the word "hope" scrawled boldly across the screen. The room fell into a deeper silence, one richer than any spoken tribute. In that hush, every heart spoke its gratitude. Then came the testimonials, presented one by one, each story shaping the mosaic of Antero's impact. Roberto, now a successful civil engineer, stepped forward first. He cleared his throat and held up a framed blueprint. "When I was 10, my father went to prison," he said, voice trembling. "School became impossible. Mr. Antero met me in the park, under a tree with a folding table, and scavenged flashcards. Today, I design bridges, and I carry his lessons on perseverance in every beam I build." Next, Anna approached with a tablet, showing her doctoral thesis in special education. "I was labeled unteachable because I struggled to read," she explained. "He taught me to see letters as shapes, sounds as friends. That patience became my calling. Now I help children, like myself, and I owe it all to him." One by one, they came. A local nurse who had failed algebra until Antero sat beside her at a picnic table. A small business owner who learned bookkeeping by Antero's side, using coffee stirrers as counting beads. The delivery cyclist who memorized vocabulary on the backs of old pastry boxes. And then, the moment that wrapped the room in pure tenderness, a shy 7-year-old boy shuffled forward, clutching a notebook decorated with crayon stars. He pressed a hand-drawn worksheet into Antero's trembling hands. "I don't know my letters yet," the boy admitted, gaze fixed on his lap. "But my mom said you make numbers, and words feel like friends. Would you teach me?" Antero knelt beside him, brushing the boy's hair back. His eyes glistened. "My dear friend," he whispered, "we will learn together." The boy beamed, and the attendees felt a collective swell of hope. When the testimonials ended, Miss Ligia stepped back onto the stage. Her voice quivered with pride as she announced the formal dedication of the Sala de Saber Antero. "This space will stay open every afternoon," she declared. All are welcome, no fees, no judgments, only the same generosity Professor Antero has shown us. Volunteers will teach, share stories, and carry forward his legacy. A cheer rose so powerful that it shook the rafters. People embraced one. Another, tears glinting in the morning sun. Strangers exchanged enthusiastic nods, united by a man they had once overlooked. As the event drew to a close, Antero returned to the gallery wall. He traced the frames of his photographs with tenderness, each image a chapter of his life's work. A small envelope was tucked behind one frame. He retrieved it, unfolded the card inside, and read, "To the teacher who gave us words to speak. O truth, may your silence continue to resonate." He clutched the card to his chest and closed his eyes. In that moment, he understood the true power of silence. It wasn't emptiness, but a canvas on which gratitude, love, and respect could paint their most vibrant colors. He had never asked for praise, but now he stood surrounded by the living proof of his lessons, the countless lives he had touched, all gathered to honor the man who believed in them when no one else did. As the crowd slowly dispersed, some lingering to sign up for volunteer shifts, others lingering to speak one last word of thanks, Antero remained by the podium. He breathed in the warmth of their appreciation, feeling a gentle peace settle in his bones. When the last visitor stepped outside, Miss Ligia joined him. She draped her arm around his shoulders and said softly, "You taught us that sometimes. What's left unsaid carries the greatest meaning." Antero smiled and looked at the now empty stage. "And you reminded me that every silence holds a story waiting to be told." Together, they switched off the projector, closed the gallery curtains, and stepped into the afternoon sun. Two custodians of a legacy that would echo in every quiet corner where kindness and knowledge meet. Chapter 5. A legacy served warm. The smell of fresh bread floated through the streets like a quiet hymn. It was Monday morning, exactly 1 month after that unforgettable tribute to Professor Antero. Bella Massa had changed. It wasn't just a bakery anymore. It was a landmark of memory, a sanctuary of second chances. Inside, children gathered at the back, seated on colorful cushions, flipping through books they once feared they'd never understand. A teenage girl read aloud to a boy who still stumbled on syllables. Nearby, retired neighbors sat at a round table, gently correcting job application forms for young adults who'd dropped out of school but wanted to try again. At the center of it all sat Antero. No longer just the old man in the corner. No longer invisible. Now he was Professor Antero, or simply Tio Antero to the kids. His cane leaned against his chair like a staff of wisdom. His coffee cup, always warm, had been replaced with a hand-painted mug from one of the children. It read, "Words can build homes." He looked out over the room with quiet joy. This was what he had always dreamed of, even when no one had been listening. Miss Ligia approached with a gentle smile. "Today's the day," she whispered, sliding a small flyer into his hand. At the top, bold letters read, "Antero's Circle of Learning, official city program launch, free literacy, tutoring, mentorship and support for all ages, powered by Bella Massa and community volunteers." The mayor was coming, so was the press. But more importantly, dozens of former students had signed up to be the new teachers. Antero looked at the flyer and blinked through a mist of emotion. "You did this," he murmured. Ligia shook her head. "No, you did this. We just finally saw it." The ceremony was simple. Like Antero himself, no podium, no big screens, just benches under the jacaranda tree in the little square next. To the bakery, one by one, former students stood to speak, but this time they didn't tell stories about Antero. They shared how they were passing it forward. "I started a reading circle at the nursing home," said a young woman. "I teach "English in my building's garage on weekends," said a bus driver. "I help single mums finish their GEDs," whispered another, eyes shining. And then the crowd fell silent. Antero stood. His voice was soft but unwavering. "I have no riches, no awards, but I have this." He motioned to the crowd, the children, the trees, the bakery. "A legacy made not of gold, but of pages turned, letters learned, lives changed." He looked down at a young boy beside him, the same one who had once said he didn't know his letters. "Can you read this for me?" Antero asked, pointing to a simple sentence on the flyer. The boy squinted, then beamed. "Knowledge is a gift that multiplies when shared." Applause erupted. Some wept, others held hands, and one woman whispered, "We judged a man by his coat, and never saw the crown beneath it." That night, the lights of Bella Massa stayed on longer than usual. The Sala do Saber remained open late, filled with laughter, chalk dust, and the soft rustle of turned pages. And on the bakery's front window, in bold lettering, they painted a new phrase: "Here we serve bread and futures," because in a world quick to judge, one quiet man had reminded them all, the most powerful stories begin in silence and end in transformation. Was that ending what you expected? Drop a comment and share the biggest lesson this story left you with.